Have you ever wondered what it would be like if you took Banished and set it in the Snowpiercer world? Well, Frostpunk is basically exactly that. It takes place in an alternate timeline where snowstorms have led humanity to the edge of destruction, as crops are ruined and millions are left dead. You start by setting out with a group of survivors and supplies with the goal of surviving this wild weather. The game centers around weather conditions that can either increase or decrease as the game goes on. Gradually, the game will get colder with slight movements of the upwards to give you a tiny bit of relief. The temperature in Frostpunk has absolutely devastating effects. It can do things like stop your food production in a building that you have, or preventing you from using an objective that you could use to win the actual scenario. It can also do things like cause people to get sick if they're exposed to too much coldness, which can then force them to go to a hospital, making them ineffective and useless workers. Your settlement centers around the generator, which is a massive building at the center of your civilization that produces heat from burning coal to keep buildings and people from freezing to death. As the temperature drops, you'll need to add more heaters around the map or research new levels of generator power so that you can burn it more intensely to get more heat or to get more range to cover more buildings. It's a very careful balancing act because burning too much coal or using too much heat can cause devastating effects on your coal economy, which means that you could run out of coal and have your entire civilization just go cold and freeze to death. And you don't want to build smaller heaters too much because you might expand too much and be burning too much coal or turn the heat up too much when you don't need to because you'll burn through your supply really quickly. The gameplay centers around a hope and discontent mechanic as well that is very important to how your civilization is going to go. It's basically an approval rating in a sense. Hope is how hopeful people are, how things are going. Discontent is how unhappy people are. And if discontent goes too high, you can get banished from your own civilization and lose. As you play and adopt new laws and do different things, you'll gain new quests along the way that'll be basically aimed at raising or lowering hope and discontent. So for example, if you have too many sick people, your people will demand hospitals or demand more doctors, which will require you to either build them or accept the fact that maybe you just can't build them or deal with it right now, which will raise discontent and lower hope by failing it. Both hope and discontent and the generator mechanics really emphasize just how much this game is a survival game and a game about making difficult decisions. Sometimes you might just not be able to commit to as many luxuries as you'd want to. Giving too much warmth at the wrong time, or building out too many facilities, or taking care of too many sick people can have devastating effects like draining your resources and causing you to lose. You also have the ability of certain laws like allowing children to work or allowing you to institute higher working hours if needed, and eventually you'll be given the ability to choose between two different law paths, basically a religious or an authoritarian one. Doing the authoritarian one kind of solidifies your rule more as an authoritarian, a dictatorship, whereas the religious one, you create a religion around yourself, making yourself the basic messiah of your people. These have pretty massive effects on how your civilization grows. Like going down the religious path, you're going to be building churches and stuff like that to try and make people believe that you have hope and believe in you as a ruler. And you can even decide how far you want to go. Do you want your own religious inquisition going around beating people to death who are opposed to you or not? And while I do really like these, it is a bit railroaded in a sense. Doing one or the other really just kind of restricts you down to that. You don't have a whole lot of other choices. And as a result, the game can feel a bit repetitive because every run kind of feels the same. There's also technology that can be researched, and there's a ton of them. The tech tree is fixed, but it is fairly expansive. You get a lot of different choices in how you want to shape your civilization and different advancements that you want to make, and some of these, depending on the scenario, will be better or worse. Now, there's 3 scenarios in the current game. They say that there's more coming, but each of them is kind of about 3 to 6 hours, depending on how fast you play the game. You can either play at a really fast speed, or you can play at a really slow speed if you want to take your time while playing the game. The basic scenario is basically just trying to survive the simple storm, whereas some of these scenarios add on additional objectives, like keeping a building from freezing. The biggest problem with this game is the lack of variety. It gets very repetitious very quickly because after about your second run, you've kind of seen it all. You've built most of the buildings, you're kind of doing the same thing again and again. You're just surviving, sending out scouts to try and find and identify things, and that's just kind of it again and again and again. There's really only 2 law choices, I said before, the religious and the authoritarian route, and they're both kind of the same thing. I do wish it was a little bit more narrative elements to this game. It's where I think this game is the strongest because the UI is amazing, the sleek style of the game really draws you in and really makes you invested into this world. And then you have this amazing text that comes in front of you, like instituting child labor laws. You have a mother who's begging you not to let her child go to work because she's upset that her children might get injured. These things add a lot of personality to the game and the citizens that you have. And then you'll send a scout out to go and identify an object off in the distance, like a wreck or a settlement that you might see, and they'll try and figure out if these people might need to be helped and brought to your settlement, or if maybe there's loot to be found. All these are awesome, but the problem is there's just not enough of them. there's so few of them that you'll start to see the same things again and again on your second and third playthrough, which gets really dull. Now, from a graphics perspective, the game looks amazing. The only complaint I have is that you can't zoom in enough in this game, meaning that you kind of have to look at things from a distance, which is kind of a bummer because it's really fun in these kind of games to just zoom in and see what your citizens are doing or the buildings that are working. The sound is also incredible. There's some incredibly memorable tracks as well that play in the background, like when the snowstorm is brewing in and you've got this just daunting full soundtrack in the background that makes you think, oh my god, the horror of what is going on right now. We're desperately trying to survive. Now, overall, I really like Frostpunk a lot, and it gets an 8 out of 10. I think it's a fantastic game, and at the price point of like $30, it's pretty darn good. You get a lot of content here. You got 3 scenarios, which will probably take you a little bit over 10 hours, which is a decent value for $30. And if you get this game for $20 or $22, that is a good value for this game, because there's a lot of fun in here. It's a really sleek and stylish game that's very well designed. My only real complaints is that I wish the game was a little bit less repetitious and maybe had a little bit more modes or scenarios to do, like maybe an endless mode or something that kept going on instead of ending after a certain amount of dates. But even with all that, I do think this game is a lot of fun, and I would highly recommend it to city building or survival city building fans like Banished.